Wicked, has it gone woke? Already upset fans after being slapped with a trigger warning.
From gay times, alright, so the questions are going to be very homosexual.
Oh, good, thank goodness.
Yeah.
I didn't think woke culture could get more ridiculous, but here we are. We're gonna break down the latest Wicked-themed turn in woke culture and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, across the media, and across our politics, all from an independent perspective. First, we've got to talk Wicked, the new movie based on the musical that's making a huge splash and sparking so much cultural commentary. And over in the UK, prompted a trigger warning from the British Board of Film Classification. Yes, I mean, nobody needs a trigger warning that they're about to see green-skinned people be discriminated against, or that animals are going to be oppressed. These are not things that actually need trigger warnings attached to them. Remember, trigger warnings started as something specifically about PTSD and sexual violence and other things, so that, for example, survivors of rape wouldn't have to watch unknowingly without knowing what they were about to see and having an opportunity to maybe step out of the room or whatever, scenes depicting sexual violence. But they've morphed into something totally different and totally ridiculous, where now, for whatever reason, executives and organizations seem to think that everyday people need to be coddled and warned about any possible little thing that might upset them. But no, it's on you to know what you're going to see. And I think most people going to see Wicked are in fact familiar with at least the broad contours of its plot. So the notion that people with green skin might face discrimination or that animals are being rounded up, these are things that are known and are Googleable. And if you are a person who is so mentally fragile that you couldn't handle those scenes being depicted without it being triggering or traumatizing, first, I mean, you shouldn't be going to the movie theater. You should be seeking remedial therapy and counseling because you lack the emotional functioning and resilience of a fully functioning adult. But second, then it's on you to screen the media you're going for. We don't need broad society-based trigger warnings. It's condescending and infantilizing and just turns all of this into a laughable joke. I haven't seen Wicked yet, though I have seen the musical and I liked it a lot. And I actually think it's an interesting piece. I don't agree with all of its political themes or messages, but some of it, including the discrimination against green people, which is clearly, I think, an allegory for racism, is interesting and thought-provoking. But no, it doesn't need a frickin' trigger warning. And when they do this kind of thing, especially kind of added alongside all the woke stuff that we're going to get into that's been a part of the press tour around this film, it just distracts from and discredits what, from what I've heard, is a pretty good film and piece of art that they've produced, and that's a shame for everyone involved and for the viewers. But can anyone possibly be defending this absurd trigger warning on Wicked? Yes. Somehow, some people are. Guys, I recently recommitted to a new health and fitness routine. Can you tell? And I'm doing that with the help of today's sponsor, Lumen, which is helping me increase my energy levels, feel better in my body, and gain muscle. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a cool and easy-to-use device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and gives you tailored advice to improve your workouts, nutrition, stress management, and even your sleep. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and better sleep. Lumen doesn't just help you measure your metabolic health, it also gives you meal suggestions and other ideas to improve it. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health or get a great gift for the health-conscious person in your life, go to lumen.me/Brad for 15% off your Lumen. That is LUMEN wicked.me/Brad for 15% off your purchase. Also available at the link in the description or in the pinned comment. And now, back to the show. And of course, The Guardian, that left-wing British newspaper, published a piece mocking people who have criticized the trigger warning and defending it. In the piece, writer Stuart Heritage wrote that Wicked's green skin trigger warning may feel silly, but not as silly as those crying woke. Yes, because the British Board of Film Classification issuing a trigger warning for Wicked isn't the problem, it's us noticing that and criticizing it that's bad. Very incisive commentary. Heritage mockingly writes that children need to learn that racism and animal abuse happens every day. They should be subjected to depictions of this without warning, especially if they're 5 years old and just want to watch a nice fairy tale movie with lots of lovely songs in it. In short, you cannot traumatize a child enough, and that's why it's clear that the real villain of this story is a polite little notice that someone put up on a website. How dare they? Well, it wasn't someone putting something up on a website, it was the British Board of Film Classification, so... And if you think that children who see Wicked would be traumatized, you've lost the plot. They would not be. And in fact, the themes of like racism or of scapegoating people like they do with the animals in the play, stroke movie, those would go right over a kid's head. So you don't need to warn them about it because they're not even going to know that that's what's really being implied. The same way that's true for all sorts of children's literature and books and movies that have themes that are broader or maybe for the adults to read into them, but they go over the kid's head. That's absolutely the case with Wicked. And it's on parents to know what they're bringing their kid for, so they should be doing some research about the things they're bringing their child to beforehand. They don't need trigger warnings for that. I feel like this is just reverse polarization. Conservatives don't like trigger warnings, and I hate conservatives, so I must defend trigger warnings. No matter how silly, absurd, and even counterproductive they may actually be. And that's the last part that I really think, with maybe the rarest of exceptions for things like genuine depictions of sexual violence, we need to just categorically abolish trigger warnings. Extensive research into them shows that they accomplish absolutely nothing besides insulting people and condescending to them, and in fact, may even heighten people's anxiety and make things worse. As BigThink.com reports, a Harvard study, which was a meta-analysis of other studies, showed that trigger warnings are fruitless and anxiety-inducing. They found that scientific evidence does not support the use of trigger warnings, which are described as a, quote, disingenuous gesture of trauma awareness. Gee, who could have ever guessed that that would be the case? Scientists analyzed 18 studies, and when these studies' results were pooled together, the researchers found that trigger warnings had no effect on subjects' emotional responses to the material, did not make them likelier to avoid it, and had little to no effect on participants' comprehension. So they accomplished absolutely nothing. They did, however, slightly increase subjects' anxiety prior to being exposed to the material. Oh good. They made people more anxious while accomplishing absolutely nothing. What's not to love? Now, I do certainly agree with the guy from The Guardian that trigger warnings on the British Board of Film Classification's notices and attached to Wicked aren't the end of the world. It's not the biggest story of the day. I just find it laughable, amusing, entertaining, but also kind of disturbing. And I wanted to make the broader point that I really don't think trigger warnings should exist, because this is just a tiny bit that's part and parcel of a broader cultural movement towards infantilizing society, towards this kind of safe space culture, and all these other things that I think we need to push back on. But this is far from the only part of the wicked cultural phenomenon that has been infected by woke brain rot. The two stars, Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, have done a press tour that has at times descended into absurdity, like it did in this interview with The Gay Times, which unfortunately is a thing that exists. Take a listen to this clip where they discuss how queer Wicked is, or something.
I'm from Gay Times, all right? So the questions are going to be very homosexual.
Oh, good, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Right in my wheelhouse. You know,
We're ready.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw this part, I knew that what was coming was going to be cringe. Just 100% certainty.
What I love about Wicked, and I think what a lot of people love about Wicked and this story, is that there are loads of queer allegories. From queerness and otherness with Elphaba and allyship with Glinda, which doesn't feel too far off your own personal experiences. So, so how does that inform your performances in this film?
I mean, Oz is just a celebration of uniqueness, and everyone is so beautiful in Oz, and I don't think it even is a conscious discussion. Yeah, everyone is just so beautifully queer, and that roots all the way back to the L. Frank Baum books, where, like, literally the most commonly used word in the books is queer, and it's Star Theater, queer, lovely, beautiful friends, and I don't know, it's just a celebration, and how do you honor that history?
Is Ariana Grande okay? First off, unless I'm forgetting something, nobody in Wicked is queer. Like, there are, first, fake, dumb, made-up category, but there are no gay or lesbian characters that I can recall. Secondly, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was published in the year 1900. So the reason that it used the word queer a ton throughout the text was not because it was a work of LGBTQIA2 spirit plus Wi-Fi password community, whatever, allyship. No, it was because back then queer was routinely used as a word that meant strange or odd. It had nothing to do with queerness as Ariana Grande or Cynthia Erivo might understand that concept today. Does she not know that? I mean, I don't expect my pop stars or my actresses to be savants or sophisticated consumers of literature, but yikes, to have put all this work into this and still have such profound misconceptions about it is kind of embarrassing. Also, Elphaba is literally not queer. She's depicted as heterosexual, and her strangeness or oddness most closely parallels with race or racism, not really sexuality. There's a lot more to come in this interesting interview.
Oz is a very queer place. So, theoretically, what do you think a pride parade would look like?
Oh my God. One short day.
Yes.
It would look like one short day.
For sure.
Every day in the Emerald City is a pride parade.
Oh my God,
right?
yeah.
I mean, look at, like...
That's actually great.
But it's true.
Yeah.
Even, like, the chickens. Those
Snow
chickens
leopard with
are
the little
gay.
cape.
Oh, so what you're saying is everyone in Oz is
I think so, a little bit.
various.
Come on.
Yeah.
Why
Okay, I
not?
have to ask you, there are a select group of fans of L. Frank Baum's original works that do ship Glinda and Elphaba as a
bet.
couple.
Oh,
I
sure.
bet.
I think
think?
Alfie is. She goes wherever the wind goes. I think she loves Glinda. I think she loves love. I think it is.
I think
And I don't think there's anything wrong with like celebrating the deep connection that both of them have.
Yeah.
Like they do have a real. It's
True
a
love.
relationship. It is true love, which is probably why people are shipping it. You know, because what they build with each other is an unbreakable bond and love. You know?
And trust and truth and like just such a safe space for one another, which is what all relationships should be. So, you know, whether it's romantic or platonic or, you know, maybe Glinda might be a little in the closet, but if there were a time, maybe, you know, you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Give it a little more time.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it is just a true love.
Yeah.
And I think that is like transcends sexuality. It's just kind of a deep safety within each other. And that's why they probably ship it.
Yeah.
So I thought this was kind of eye-roll inducing because not everything needs to be gay or lesbian or queer, and there's no textual basis for Glinda being closeted. Like, it's all just made up. And if anything, it kind of takes away from the really beautiful kind of platonic friendship that they have that is a key part of Wicked, that they are trying to make it a secret in the closet romance thing or whatever to placate the queer lit fan fictioners of the world. It actually doesn't need to be that. And not everything needs to be sexualized or romanticized when actually there are really meaningful, beautiful platonic relationships that can be impactful and powerful and complicated and nuanced. And I think that's what the relationship between Alphaba and Glinda is supposed to be about, not whatever they're trying to make it out to be here. The press tour that these two have done has been widely ridiculed because it is very bizarre. They can't stop crying in almost every interview. They're constantly touching and climbing all over each other, which, whatever, I guess, but it's all just a little bit odd. I, at least, though, am not really going to let it take the shine off the movie for me. I still intend to see it, and I hope I enjoy it. I'll let you guys know. But what do you guys think of all this? From the trigger warnings to the queer media interviews and beyond, are you on board with the wokeification of Wicked, or are you not a fan? Let me know in the comments below, and do hit that like button while you're at it. Make sure you're subscribed, and remember to leave your thoughts in the comments section, because I do take the time to read the comments, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. And now, it's time for Brad vs. TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, this fat activist is going viral for her latest absurd stunt and petition. Take a listen.
Airlines make their products smaller every year. Then they blame us for not fitting. If your car got smaller every year, wouldn't you be pissed? Seats are getting smaller, seatbelts are getting shorter, and they pack us in tighter so they can make more money. But when we can't squeeze into their tiny seats, it's somehow our fault. I'm done letting airlines make us the problem when it's them causing it.
Babe, I'm gonna hold your hand when I say this, but the problem might be you. Trust me, as a guy who's 6'3", I can understand the complaint that airplane seats are too small, and maybe they're getting smaller, I don't know. But regardless, I get not being able to fit comfortably in them. But in your case, even a very spacious and generously sized airplane seat wouldn't be enough because you are incredibly morbidly obese and overweight. That is the problem, not the airplane. And we shouldn't be trying to redesign the whole world to accommodate all 400 pounds of you. We should be trying to get you the help you need to live a healthier lifestyle and make changes before you eat your way into an early grave. I mean, this will almost certainly kill you. This will shave decades off of your life expectancy. So the solution is not to enable that, but to try to help you. It's not compassionate to enable you as you slowly kill yourself with food. But rather than take any individual accountability or seek self-improvement in any way, this creator, who goes by JBay online, is circulating a petition demanding that the federal government, via the FAA, force airlines to give morbidly obese people 2 seats for the price of 1, or even 3 seats for the price of 1, so they can fit comfortably and fly. And JBay even frames this as an issue of civil rights.
Here's an update on the plus-size travel petition. Over 39,000 people have signed. And it doesn't stop there. People from over 121 countries have added their voices. That's nearly every continent represented. This issue has sparked a global conversation, proving that accessibility and equality in travel matter to people all over the world. The petition has even been covered by major news outlets, showing this is a global conversation. More and more plus-size individuals have shared their story with me. And it's clear that this issue affects so many of us. So I launched a survey, and the results were eye-opening to say the least. The survey findings made me want to amplify your voices even more. Hearing your stories solidified how important it is to make sure this issue is heard and addressed. Many of us, including myself, have found hope in this movement. Seeing each other's strength and courage reminds us that we deserve to travel with confidence, dignity, and joy. Together, we're rewriting the narrative, showing the world that we deserve to travel freely, confidently, and without fear. Join the body equality in travel movement now at change.org/plus-size travel.
There's a lot to unpack here, including the revelation that apparently more than 39,000 people have lost their minds. There is no issue of equality here. Everyone, no matter who they are, is offered the same airplane seat at the same price. If you are so massively overweight that you can't fit in a single airplane seat, then you should purchase a second seat to accommodate your needs. Your needs are different from other people, so you have to pay for more as well. The same way that I spend more on groceries than my sister does because I eat a lot more than she does because I'm a bigger person. That's not discrimination. That's just the reality that people aren't the same. And it's actually ridiculous to suggest that other people should have to pay more, which is what would happen, right? If they had to give morbidly obese people extra seats, they would have fewer seats on the plane to sell. The prices would be overall higher potentially if it was a full flight because you have made terrible decisions about your health and about your body. Of course, you should still be able to travel. I'm not saying you shouldn't be, but don't frame this as an issue of civil rights or equality, because this is not, in almost all cases, with perhaps the rarest of exceptions with extreme thyroid disorders or other things, being this overweight. We're not talking about a little bit chubby or 10 or 20 or 30 pounds overweight. Being this overweight is a choice. It is a product of a lifetime of terrible decisions and unhealthy habits. So to conflate having to deal with the consequences of your own choices as a fully grown adult with discrimination people face for things about themselves they cannot change and did not choose, like their skin color or their sexuality, is actually offensive and ridiculous. These things are not the same at all. Now, when somebody pointed out to J-Bay that both primarily for her health, but also to ease her travel, she could consider losing some weight, she did not take kindly to that suggestion. Here was her response.
No, what is a joke though is thinking just lose weight is a solution to systemic discrimination. The truth is, even if every fat person magically lost weight tomorrow, airplane seats would still be too small, and the systems built to exclude us would still exist. This isn't about individuals, it's about corporations profiting off discomfort and perpetuating bias. So, no, the joke isn't us, it's a system that refuses to accommodate real people. Let's change that.
This is giving delusional cope. Of course, if the issue is that airplane seats are so small that you literally cannot fit in one, not that they're just too small for comfort, which I agree would still be a problem regardless, then losing weight to the point where even you are obese rather than morbidly obese would solve that problem. It would literally go away. And it would have the added side effect of potentially saving your life or saving you from an early grave. Guys, you might be wondering why she uses the AI voice in almost all of these videos, and that's because on the videos where she does speak and use her actual voice, she struggles to speak for more than 30 seconds without losing her breath. On one level, I really do feel a sense of profound sympathy for this woman because something must have gone wrong in her life. I don't know whether it's trauma or some sort of emotional dysregulation, but something must have gone wrong for her to end up where she is today. And she does deserve our compassion on that front. But we shouldn't accept this complete dereliction of personal responsibility and just abdication of any sense of individual ownership for your outcomes or the choices you make as an adult. And the solution is not to enable such widespread self-destructive behavior and accommodate it at every turn, let alone treat it as some form of protected class akin to race. That's actually insulting to minorities who are self-segregated or discriminated against into groups because of things they can't change and didn't choose. It's to try to figure out how we ended up in this broken, unhealthy place where people like this reach these outcomes, because this doesn't exist in many other countries in the world. There is hardly anyone who looks like J-Bay, like literally near zero people in the country, maybe one or two extreme outliers. Some other countries are starting to have serious obesity issues, yes, but this is to some extent a uniquely American phenomenon. And the question is, are we going to do what it takes to make America healthy again, or are we going to add fatness to the long list of protected victim classes and enable people as they eat their way to an early grave? I know which side I'm on, but then again, I'm just a fat phobic bigot or something. What do you guys think? Will you be signing J-Bay's petition? Let me know in the comments below, and do hit that like button while you're at it. And now we've got to talk politics for a minute, because President Biden just broke the internet by announcing he'll be pardoning his son Hunter, who was convicted of multiple crimes. I'll give you all my take on this, which is somewhat nuanced and might surprise some of you, but first, let's just go over the facts. In a statement released Sunday night, President Biden said, "Today, I signed a pardon for my son Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision-making, and I kept my word, even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted by a Department of Justice controlled by his own side, the Democratic Party, by the way." Biden continued, "For my entire career, I have followed a simple principle. Just tell the American people the truth. They'll be fair-minded. Here's the truth. I believe in the justice system, but as I have wrestled with this, I also believe raw politics has infected this process, and it led to a miscarriage of justice. And once I made this decision this weekend, there was no sense in delaying it further. I hope Americans will understand why a father and president would come to this decision." So the first problem with this is just Biden's rank hypocrisy. He promised over and over again, "I will not pardon Hunter."
I'm extremely proud of my son Hunter, and I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
And now here he is, after dropping out of the election and being a lame duck president, pardoning Hunter. So this makes him a liar and a hypocrite, just objectively speaking. That's not a great look. It's also entirely fair to point out that Biden has repeatedly juxtaposed himself with Trump as a champion of the rule of law. For example, just in May of 2024, Biden tweeted, "No one is above the law." But he just signed a blanket pardon for his son, Hunter Biden, covering all potential crimes he may have committed from 2014 until 2024. So he literally made his son above the law for that entire time period. It is completely fair to call BS here and point out this hypocrisy. Now that said, I do have some mixed feelings about this. For one thing, one of the charges that Hunter Biden was prosecuted for and ultimately convicted for was a felony gun charge that related to him lying on a form when purchasing a firearm, saying he was not a drug user, when in fact, he was a drug user. He could have faced years in prison for this offense, but there's a few problems with that always made that feel wrong and unfair to me. First, I'm not sure I believe in the underlying law. If the Second Amendment is a right, not a privilege, and if you, like me, believe that the right to self-defense is a human right, why people who use drugs should not be able to access it isn't clear. And secondly, millions of people knowingly mark incorrect answers on this form because even marijuana qualifies for that, and very few ever get prosecuted for it. However, here's where I lose sympathy for Hunter Biden. Most people don't write memoirs that they sell where they detail their drug use at the exact time they signed forms testifying to the federal government they weren't using drugs. So hard to feel too bad for him on that one. And that's why I don't buy Biden's spin that this is a miscarriage of justice. Hunter obviously did do the things he was prosecuted for doing. So it's not a miscarriage of justice. And was it politically motivated in some sense? Yeah, maybe, in that the Justice Department wanted to show that they weren't just going after Trump because they were biased against Republicans. They'll go after anyone. Look, we're going after Hunter Biden as well. But that doesn't change the fact that he was guilty. So again, not a miscarriage of justice. And it's kind of rich for Biden or the Democrats to complain about political prosecutions, all while they have cheered on some obviously politically motivated cases and prosecutions against Trump, like the one in Brooklyn that ultimately led to Trump's felony convictions. That said, I have some sympathy for the position that Joe Biden is in. If I was a father, I wouldn't want my son to go to jail, potentially for years, all over a victimless crime, right? Nobody was harmed because Hunter Biden lied on this gun form years ago, especially if I believed that the only reason he ever got prosecuted for it was because of me being his father, which is true in that if Hunter Biden was just some random dude and wasn't a Biden, he never would have written the book, he never would have had all the political scrutiny, and he probably never would have been prosecuted for this. And while I don't necessarily think it's the morally right thing to do, I have to admit to you that I might do the same in Biden's position. I might put family first. Now, one counterpoint I've heard to this from a lot of people online after I tweeted this out is that to be a good father means not bailing your kid out. And part of the reason Hunter Biden ended up such a mess is because Joe constantly bailed him out. And I can agree with that to a certain extent. And I guess what I'd say in response is that if my child actually harmed someone, sexual assault or robbery or any sort of violence or something like that, I wouldn't pardon them. Even if I had the power to, I would say, no, you have to deal with the consequences of your actions. But when it comes to a victimless paperwork crime, I don't know. I have a lot less sympathy for the notion that any father should let their son go to jail and sit behind bars, see the inside of a prison cell for such a thing. Now, where I lose sympathy for Biden is the fact that he didn't just pardon Hunter for the gun crime or for some of the tax charges he faced. He gave him a blanket pardon on any crimes he may have committed from 2014 to 2024, an entire decade-long get out of jail free card. That's indefensible. Now they'll say, well, he's worried about Trump going after him now that Trump's going to be in power and have a Trump Department of Justice going after Hunter Biden. But they can only go after him to the extent that they could get him convicted by a jury of his peers. And if he engaged in actual shady behavior with his business dealings or other things that he was convicted for by a jury of his peers, he shouldn't get carte blanche for an entire decade of potential criminal activity, which may include stuff with real victims and real harm. That is shady and totally, I think, indefensible. Whereas a more limited pardon or even a commutation of specific offenses that Hunter had committed, I think I could understand much more so. Now, I will point out that there's a fair degree of hypocrisy here. Democrats, of course, all talk about the rule of law and all this stuff, and it's kind of gone out the window, at least for some of them, now that they're defending Biden. But also, Republicans need to remember that when Trump was in office, he pardoned a lot of guilty people as well, including some, like Charles Kushner, with personal familial connections to him. In fact, he even just gave Charles Kushner, who he pardoned, an ambassadorship. And that's just one example of many where Trump has used his office and kind of blurred the lines between personal relationships and public office or political power. So if you're going to be consistently against that, you do need to be consistent. Now, I want to play a couple funny clips of Democrats twisting themselves into pretzels to defend Biden over this, like Representative Jasmine Crockett, a congresswoman from Texas, who is, of course, a Democrat, who defended this on MSNBC in a truly bizarre interview. Take a listen.
Well, I won't pretend to speak for the entire caucus, but I will say, way to go, Joe. Let me be the first one to congratulate the president for deciding to do this, because at the end of the day, we know that we have a 34-count convicted felon that is about to walk into the White House. So for anyone that wants to clutch their pearls now because he decided that he was going to pardon his son, I would say take a look in the mirror. Because we also know that when it comes to this cabinet has more people accused of sexual assault than any incoming cabinet probably ever in the history of America. So we are living in unprecedented times, and we know that this was completely political. As someone who serves on the Oversight Committee, this was gamesmanship the entire time.
So there's so much to unpack here. First, this congresswoman is doing a cable news interview from her phone on an airplane and coach while it's boarding, just around other people in the background. What the actual heck is going on here? Imagine being one of those people just moving into your seat in the background and you have this woman yapping about politics, and little do you know, she's on cable news, broadcasting you without your consent to millions of people. Like, if you're going to be on board a flight when you're supposed to do a hit, you can't make the hit. We can't be doing this. The quality is terrible. It's bizarre. And I'm sure you could have found another Democratic backbencher willing to do the hit who wasn't boarding a flight at that time. Like, media, we got to have some standards. I support the remote hits and how they've become more popular during COVID. They worked out great for me. I could do TV from my home studio, but like we got to maintain some standards, media, okay? And then the actual substance of what Jasmine Crockett says here is pathetic. She says it's amazing that Biden is using his political power to let his son off the hook for crimes he absolutely did commit. And her only explanation why is whataboutism, saying Republicans bad, Trump felonies, yada, yada, yada. That is not a defense. Pointing to the other side is not a moral defense for your own actions ever. In fact, you're pointing out your own hypocrisy. That you act like it's such a bad thing that Republicans support a felon, that Republicans don't care about the rule of law and about crime and all this stuff. And then you're saying, yeah, we don't care either. See? What? Do you not understand that you just exposed yourself on television? Of course, we saw a similarly low IQ take from TikTok stars like Harry Sisson. Take a listen.
So let me just get this straight. Republicans are upset that Joe Biden pardoned Hunter Biden, but they also voted for a convicted felon who pardoned his buddies while in office. Is that not just hypocritical? Got it.
Harry, Google whataboutism and get back to us. Because pointing out the other side's shortcomings is not a moral defense of your own actions. And to the extent it's true that you're highlighting Republican hypocrisy in this video, you're also highlighting your own hypocrisy because you think it's bad when Republicans vote for a felon, like you say, or you think it's bad when Republicans use their office to benefit themselves or their families, as you've criticized Trump for many times. But here you are saying it's amazing, as you did in your other video, and praising Biden for doing the exact same thing. You literally just broadcast your own hypocrisy in 4K. And while some of them may be hypocrites, it's not unreasonable for Republicans to be upset that Biden is pardoning Hunter because Biden repeatedly promised over and over again, I will not pardon Hunter, and then did it anyway. He lied to the American people. Yet here you are shamelessly shilling for that because you are a partisan activist and shill, not an independent commentator or trustworthy analyst. It will never cease to amaze me how folks like Harry can set up their tripod, record themselves, edit, and post a little video like this and go through this whole process thinking they just dropped absolute bars and not realize that they actually just exposed themselves in 4K. Anyway, guys, my take on this whole Hunter Biden situation is kind of complicated, but I think what Biden ended up doing here with how broad it is and him having promised over and over again that he wouldn't is deeply hypocritical and dishonest and unjustifiable. But like I said, I do have some sympathy that the charges against Hunter Biden aren't all legitimate or shouldn't all be criminalized against him. And I do have sympathy for the role of a father in this situation, wanting to spare your son from seeing the inside of a prison cell for victimless offenses. That said, it will never cease to amaze me how shamelessly hypocritical partisan commentators on both sides can be when it comes to these kinds of issues. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below and do hit that like button while you're at it. And now I'll wrap up today's show by reading some of your comments from recent episodes. One person says, Brad is spitting fire today, reacting to a shoe on head video and giving the proper definition of genocide. Heck yeah. Kind of random, but does sweet potato casserole belong with the sides or the dessert on Thanksgiving? And yes, there is a right answer. It actually belongs in the trash because it's sickeningly sweet and disgusting, and I don't even like sweet potatoes. Another person writes, honestly, I think if the child of a Trump voter absolutely insists on sitting out Thanksgiving dinner in order to deprive their family of their presents or whatever, instead of, like you said, pretty much permanently messing up their own physical appearance with something like a facial tattoo purely out of spite, they could just be like, sorry, family, I'm going to be absent this year, and instead I'm going to spend my Thanksgiving volunteering and making meals for homeless people or something. Then some good would actually come from it. They wouldn't be making themselves look so immature and petty, and their family wouldn't have to deal with the angst. Win, win, win. I hope you and your boyfriend had a lovely Thanksgiving, Brad. Enjoy the pie. We did, and thank you so much. And I agree with you. I'd have more sympathy for these TikTokers boycotting their family Thanksgivings if they were doing something positive with it rather than just virtue signaling on the internet. Another person writes, this Thanksgiving argument always amazes me, especially when they tell us to do our research. The federal Thanksgiving holiday has zero to do with the fable story of the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people. Sarah Hale, author of Godey's Lady Book and Mary Had a Little Lamb, had been championing for a national day of Thanksgiving in the years leading up to the Civil War as a way to bring our country together after increasingly bitter and tense elections. Prior to that, the only Thanksgiving holidays were in New England, determined village by village, and they weren't all at the same time. Do some research before lecturing me and telling me to read some articles. Well, I will let you guys all hash out the historical debate in the comments. Some really interesting back and forths have been going on there. But yeah, I do think TikTokers should perhaps not lecture us to learn our real history while they're actually spewing fake history. Doesn't feel like too much to ask, but then again, it is 2024. Another person writes, that woman's rant is even sillier than you think. The story of the first Thanksgiving is itself false history. Thanksgiving is a Christian tradition that long predates the Pilgrims, and the Pilgrims themselves actually have nothing to do with this country. The connection between them and the holiday was made up by writers looking to create national mythology in the 19th century. Guys, we are getting a little over my head in the weeds here of the true history of Thanksgiving, so I'll let you guys sort it out in the comments, but I've been following it with great interest, because a lot of you have a lot of knowledge or different perspectives on this. Another person says, Brad, Columbus Day is very important to Italian Americans. Columbus Day was created in 1893, the year after the massacre of New Orleans, the largest ethnic lynching in American history, in which 11 Italian immigrants were murdered out of fear and prejudice. Columbus Day isn't about Columbus, it's about the contribution Italian heritage peoples such as Columbus have made to American history. Progressives who want us to remember every slight of history have completely erased the history of Italian Americans because it's inconvenient to their narrative. Please don't help them in their cause by dismissing Columbus Day as unimportant. Well, thanks for sharing your perspective. I don't think I dismissed Columbus Day as unimportant. I just said that people care a lot less about it than Thanksgiving, which is objectively true. Thanksgiving is much more widespread celebrated and cared about by America at large than Columbus Day ever was. That's all I said, and it's just a true thing. I wasn't passing any judgment one way or the other on Columbus Day itself. That's a debate for another time. Another person writes, remember when the left created a radio network to take on Rush? That didn't last long. Also, that chick needs to learn about the murder, RAPE, slavery, land theft, cannibalism, etc. that her glorious Indians practiced. It's infuriating how the most grossly ignorant leftists believe they are the smartest. Yeah, I always find the land back, land acknowledgement types kind of funny because it's like, who are you going to give it back to? The last people that had it? What about the people they conquered and took it from? Like, they don't seem to understand that this was just the way of the world for thousands and thousands of years. Another person writes, in regards to Thanksgiving, I am a Native American and French Canadian. Thanksgiving has become a beautiful thing for everyone in America, even those who celebrate under different religious pretenses. Yes, it is important to be aware of American history, but getting upset and disrupting the holiday is going to cause more problems and more disconnect. It is important that we work for peace and understanding of each other, working with what we have now. Let's be thankful for our freedom and celebrate harvest, thanks, and family together. Just wanted to add my 2 cents. Thanks, Brad. Well, I appreciate your support, and I am glad to hear that for you, like many Native and Indigenous Americans, you also like Thanksgiving. That was one of the other crazy things about that video, is she kept acting like all Indigenous people agree with her when a lot of them celebrate Thanksgiving and like it a lot. Like, no. Another person writes, although the girl who was vehemently against any celebrations on Thanksgiving was too psycho for my liking, she is at least one of the few consistent people out there. There's so many leftists that call Thanksgiving a colonizer's holiday and shame those that celebrate it, only to go over to grandma's house later that evening to eat up all the turkey and pie. Excuse me, they're just putting their body positivity activism into practice, okay? I'm not afraid to acknowledge the dark origins of Thanksgiving, but if you strongly criticize a holiday and those who partake in it, but still celebrate it anyway, it shows that you really don't care enough about your cause in the first place. I hope you had a great gravy-fried Thanksgiving. Brad, keep doing what you do. Well, thank you for the comment and your support, and I do agree with you, at least to that narrow extent, that if you're gonna complain about Thanksgiving and say it's a colonizer's holiday and it celebrates mass slaughter and all that, yeah, you probably should boycott it, because if you participate anyway, that would be hypocritical. Another person writes, LOL, turkeys are so aggressive. They are clearly trying to erase us, not the other way around. Let's see if this girl still defends them after I put her in a her versus 100 turkeys gladiator battle during breeding season. All jokes aside, and pardon me for the unsolicited backseating, but have you considered setting up a Patreon and or doing live streams? I know nothing about either, but to the people watching, spam the comments if you'd like live streams every now and then. Yes, I have considered it, and I'm got some ideas in mind for down the road, but right now I got my hands full enough just doing the show and producing it as is. But yeah, do let me know in the comments what kind of stuff you would like to see. Another person writes, I love the show, Brad, but don't mention me and DEI together. The below message is intended in a friendly, cheerful, glad I'm not covered under DEI, but people should know about this too tone. Feel free to summarize as you see fit. This person writes, I have obvious vision and hearing disabilities. As a disabled white woman, DEI has nothing to do with me as a beneficiary because disabilities exist across all racial, ethnic, and cultural groups. I am reasonably successful and I love my job, but it wasn't due to DEI. The biggest reason DEI doesn't talk about disabilities is confidentiality, due to the Americans with Disabilities Act. In the workplace, employers are only allowed to ask whether an individual can perform all the tasks required for the job and whether there are any reasonable accommodations a person may need. They are prohibited from disclosing employee disability status to anyone without direct need to know, so these social justice warriors don't even know officially that we're there. DEI is broken, it's making racism and race awareness go in the wrong direction, and it's not addressing all the problems with equal opportunity. Also, oh my gosh, I just read something about people making their disability into an identity. I can't even. Well, thank you so much for your comment and for sharing your experiences. It's really interesting stuff. And yeah, I don't think I meant to suggest that DEI is about protecting people with disabilities. I just meant to suggest that when I say I oppose DEI, I still want a society or workplaces that are diverse and open to all people, like people with disabilities. I just don't support the DEI vision of doing that, which is identitarian and toxic in so many ways. So hopefully that clarifies, and thanks again for your comment. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet, and do hit that like button before you go. And remember to comment with your thoughts. I do take the time to read the comments, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. So do comment with your thoughts below. And remember, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.